dedicated host is a physical server in the Azure data center that is reserved for you. So if you set up an Azure dedicated host, only your VMs are deployed to it. Of course, when you set up a normal VM in Azure, you don't pick the server, right? You pick how many cores, how much RAM you want, and then available infrastructure is allocated for your VM. But with a dedicated host, it's physically a server that only has your VMs on it. This might be useful for hardware isolation if you want to make sure that all your VMs are together on the same server, maybe for latency reasons. Also, if you want better control of maintenance events for your VMs, so everything deployed to one Hyper-V host running on one physical server in the data center. Realize if you need high availability, such as we described in availability sets, you would need multiple dedicated hosts to set that up because a physical server would at times have to be rebooted. The Hyper-V host on that might require some updates at times. So if you need high availability, you have to manage that yourself through multiple dedicated hosts. The other concept to understand here is that when you set up a dedicated host, you put it in what's called a host group. So a host group is just one or more dedicated hosts that have some attributes specified. What region is it in, possibly an availability zone, and how many fault domains to put in your availability set. You can create an Azure dedicated host in the marketplace. You can also specify one when you set up a VM scale set. So let's look at an example of some of the basics of setting up an Azure dedicated host. To configure an Azure dedicated host, the first step is to set up a host group. I'll go to the marketplace for that, search for host group, create, and fill out the screen. Choose a resource group, name for the host group, a location where you want the dedicated host to live, and then if you want availability zone support, choose one of the zones available in S2, S2, and the fault domain count. I'll set that to 2, review and create. So a host group is just a container for one or more dedicated hosts that you'll set up separately. Doesn't take long to create. When it's finished, click go to resource. The next thing that would happen here is to add a dedicated host. Click on that, fill out the basics tab. The resource group should probably be the same. We'll call this the dedicated host. One, the location needs to be the same region where the host group was set up. Once you choose that region, you can see that the host group one is available. You also pick a size for this server. So this will be a physical server in the Azure data center. So this indicates the size. You should review the documentation to know which size is appropriate for you. Since I set up 2 fault domains, I pick one of those. Choose whether to automatically replace on failure, review and create. Now, I'll get an error for this because in this Azure free account that I set up, there aren't enough cores available. So physical servers have many cores that are configured with them. So for the purposes of the exam, you can walk through to this point just as I did. And if you can't create it all the way, that's okay. Next, I'll show you how to access this dedicated host when you create a VM. So I'll go back to the marketplace, create a resource, just choose a VM image. I won't walk through all of these steps here. You've seen this in other videos. On the advanced tab, there is a choice for choosing host group. So if you have a host group and dedicated server set up, make sure you choose the region for the VM to match the region for the dedicated host. You'll be able to choose it here to complete your setup. At that point, the VM will be deployed to your physical server in the Azure data center.